am a storyteller in stone, but that's all I am. I wanted to tell the world that there was once a race of people that lived here that were remarkable. I didn't intend to make it this large, you know. I intended to make something 100 feet high. Gee, the 100-foot figure would look like nothing. And I said, oh, what the hell, I got no place to go. So I slept over there for 5 mornings, 5 nights. And I said, I'll carve the whole mountain. Now they knew I was crazy. Yeah, really nuts. Wheels.
Korczak Ziolkowski was a mountain carver, and this collection of historic pictures and comments from Korczak will give you a chance to meet this extraordinary man who had a bigger-than-life dream. Korczak's Crazy Horse Memorial is the largest sculptural undertaking the world has ever known, and it's now being carved in the round from a 600-foot-high granite mountain in the Black Hills of South Dakota. The tools are jackhammers, dynamite, and bulldozers. Millions of tons have been blasted off, blocking out the rough form of Crazy Horse, which one day will look just like Korczak's large-scale model. One of the most amazing things about Crazy Horse is that not one penny of federal or state money is involved. A strong believer in the free enterprise system, Korczak insisted Crazy Horse be financed by the interested public through an admission fee and contributions. The Crazy Horse dream was born when Sioux Indian Chief Henry Standing Bear invited Korczak to the Black Hills to carve an Indian memorial. Standing Bear wrote, "My fellow chiefs and I would like the white man to know the red man has great heroes also."
Well, you know, I've been in Auburn since I was a year old. I was born in Boston, and I was brought up by an Irish prize fighter. And I always told him when I was 16 I was going to beat, but I was just going to whip him, that's all. When I was 16 I couldn't quite do it, so I left him. I went to work on the waterfront. And I always said I wanted to do something worthwhile with my life. And I wanted to become a sculptor. And then one day when I was 13, I'd read about this man Borglum carving a mountain. Little thinking that about 16 years later I was going to be working as his assistant at Mount Rushmore. Then I got a letter from this old Indian I'd never met, Standing Bear. And he asked if I'd build a memorial to their people so the white people know that the red man had great heroes also. Well, having brought myself up and being American of Polish descent, I thought that it wasn't too much to ask for. And I had no place to go, so I decided to dedicate my life doing this.
It was newspaper stories about Korczak's marble portrait of Paderewski that prompted Standing Bear to write to Korczak. By popular vote, Paderewski won first prize for sculpture at the 1939 New York World's Fair. Korczak was a self-taught sculptor, and he carved the 1,200-pound portrait in just 5½ days. After he and Standing Bear picked out the 600-foot-high mountain in 1946, Korczak determined Crazy Horse would be much more than just a mountain carving.
Well, Standing Bear just wanted the portrait, you know, of Crazy Horse on the mountain. But after working at Rushmore and seeing how people flocked there, well, it seemed that I was making a gimmick for just tourist money, and of course that's not my intention at all. So I told Standing Bear that when I was dead, and if I got this thing even 3/4 done, it looked pretty good, and people would flock from all over the world, and those monies that would come here for years and years and years should be funneled into a university and a medical center and a museum for the Indian people of North America, not just the Sioux. And the university, we call it the University of North America. And in that way, it is a humanitarian project. I didn't come out to build a tourist gimmick, and I resent that when people say it to me, because I had no idea that I was going to have to deal with tourists or anything like that. I was naive. I just thought I'd come out and get a mountain and just start cutting.
Korczak arrived May 3rd, 1947, and lived in a tent the first 7 months while he cut trees and hand-built a log studio home. He had to spend 2 years pioneering because there were no roads, water, or electricity. When finally he could start work on the mountain, he was 40 years old and had only $174 left to his name. He had to climb a rope to get to the top of the mountain, and he single-jacked or hand-drilled the holes for the dedication blast in 1948. That winter, he built an incredible 741-step staircase all the way to the top.
Well, you can imagine how humble I started on the mountain. I started with a single jack. That's a hammer and a steel. And I drilled my holes around 3-4 feet deep and blow them off. Then I bought an old compressor. It was 24 years old, no Buddha. Weighed around 4 tons. And I put a pipeline 2,440 feet long from the compressor on the ground up to the top of the mountain. And I bought a jackhammer. Now, this took 2 years to get all this done. And then I bought another hammer, and then my steel. Dynamite is rather expensive, and my electric caps. So for the first 7 years, I climbed that 741 steps, and I carried everything up on my back. When I go up, I'd start the big compressor. I used to crank it, you know, and I'd put a 50-pound box of dynamite in one shoulder, and put a wire, a string of bits around my neck. Then I'd take maybe an 8 or 10 or 12, 14-foot steel in my left hand, and that's how I'd start up the mountain. The old Buddha, the old compressor, was kind of decrepit, and I'd get sometimes quarter of the way up, and I'd just hear that thing go kaput, 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 kaput. Put everything down, walk all the way down the staircase, start her up again, crank her up, wait there 5 minutes, start up the mountain, pick everything up, go up to the top, which is quite a distance, put all my things down, get my air valve cleaned out, oil the hammer, pick it up, get my starter steel in it. Just start to drill one hole, get down about a foot, and you could hear the big Buddha, kaput, kaput, kaput. Down I'd go again. One day I did that 9 times. You know, that gets awful old. Oh, I tell you, that walk up and down there was terrible.
He also went up and down in a dangerous homemade aerial cable car.
Oh, this is a bucket I built. It was quite a bucket, too. It'd go so far, and then it'd drop about 30 feet. Then it'd go up and down and up and down and up and down. I made a mistake, and I asked my wife to come with me once. I should never have done it. Because when she started to drop, Mother said, "This is it. You're not going up there anymore." This bucket, though, was a great, great lifesaver for me. I carried tons and tons of lumber and tons of dynamite and tons of caps and bits and steel and hammers and wagon drills. See, I had no road up. I used to ride the stallion up a great deal and tie him.
He said his horse Warrior was more like people than some people, and the big Palomino once saved Korczak's life in a blizzard. In 1951, he hung from a 1-inch rope outlining Crazy Horse on the Mountain with 176 gallons of paint, a dangerous effort that backfired.
I did a foolish thing. I painted the outline. That was no small job. And I said, this will let the people know what I'm going to cut away, the rock I'm going to cut away. You know what they thought? That was all I was going to do. I couldn't wait for the rock to come down and wear the paint away.
The winter of 1955, he blasted out the first of many roads up the back of the mountain. The bulldozer he drove to the top helped clear the rock from above the Indians' outstretched arm, which is nearly as long as a football field. Then he built a 4-story scaffold for work on the Indians' 90-foot-high head.
So the scaffold was up there, and I thought I'd put a sign up so people would understand. You can take it any way you want. A slow man at work, or for the helicopters and the planes go slow. There's a man at work. I mean, well, you got to have a little bit of humor in this world. Well, of course, that poor D4 cat, not until I got the D9 was I able to really push the rock. Because when I'd have a blast, sometimes it take me 2 or 3 days to move the rock with the small, the D4, the D6, and even an old D8 I had up there. But when I got the 9, I could move in 3 or 4 hours what it used to take me 2 or 3 days. I kind of like that sign because it's an honest sign.
On Thanksgiving Day, 1950, Korczak married Ruth Ross, one of the volunteers who helped him 10 years earlier on the 13-1/2-foot Noah Webster statue. Korczak carved it as a gift to West Hartford, Connecticut, Webster's hometown. He worked 2 years on it and cut 14 inches off the top so Noah Webster would not stand taller than Michelangelo's David. At that time, he also formed the Noah Webster Fife and Drum Corps, which paraded throughout New England and on New York's Fifth Avenue. Over the years, Korczak and Ruth had 10 children, one of whom Korczak delivered himself. There were 5 boys and 5 girls, and they even went to school in their own schoolhouse at Crazy Horse, which became very much a family project.
Well, that's how you put the electric cap into the stick of dynamite. Of course, the dynamite I'm using now is about 2 feet long. Well, you'll probably see some of it here. No, I'm using the small dynamite here, 6 of dynamite, 2 feet long. And here is Johnny at the bottom. We used to have to push all that stuff in. Well, see now, you see why we had 10 children. They were all, the boys were necessary up on the mountain, and the girls were necessary down here to help Mother with the visitors. That was rather hard work to keep on pounding that dynamite in.
To help finance the project in the early years, Korczak built and operated a lumber mill. And he and Ruth went into the dairy business, once milking 60 head of registered Holstein cattle. In winter, he sculpted portraits, such as Gutzon Borglum, for whom he had keen admiration, and Wild Bill Hickok, carved as a gift to Deadwood, South Dakota, and his famous 7-ton Sitting Bull Memorial on Sitting Bull's grave near the Missouri River in north-central South Dakota. On the mountain, harsh winters and wet springs limited his work to a frustrating average of just 5 months a year. But in spite of Mother Nature and very limited finances, Korczak and his family made steady progress, blocking out the rough form of Crazy Horse. In the beginning, Korczak worked on the mountain as a mining claim. Later, he obtained it and surrounding land for the nonprofit Crazy Horse Memorial Foundation through a land exchange with the federal government. When completed, Crazy Horse will be 563 feet high and 641 feet long, carved in the round. It will be taller than the Washington Monument and have nearly 2,000 miles of finished surface. All 4 heads on nearby Mount Rushmore would fit inside just Crazy Horse's head. A 10-story building would fit in the completed opening under the Indian's arm, and the horse's head will be 22 stories high, and a 5-room house would fit inside the horse's nostrils. More than 8 million tons have been blasted off so far. Due to the enormous size of the carving and the limited finances, no completion date can be projected. As the mountain changed, so did Korczak. This is the sculptor as a young man of 23. This is the mountain man 50 years later at age 73. And as he and his mountain changed, so did the Crazy Horse Visitor Center. Year by year, it grew to more than 70 hand-built rooms, including in 1973 the beautiful Indian Museum of North America, which represents all tribes. A second, larger wing was added 10 years later. Korczak's original log studio home contains many of his wood and marble works, such as the 55-piece grandfather's clock he hand-cut at age 18, and his famous fighting stallions, carved freestanding from a single block of African mahogany. Outside, many of his marble portraits line the walkway to the visitor complex. Korczak never took a single lesson in art, sculpture, architecture, or engineering. He worked his way through technical school and never had an opportunity to go to college. At the entrance to the visitor center are Korczak's unusual Black Hills nature gates with 270 brass silhouettes of plants and animals native to the Black Hills. At the heart of the project is Crazy Horse, a symbol of the Native American.
You know, there never was a portrait of Crazy Horse. When a white trader asked him, "Where are your lands?" he pointed over his horse's head and said, "My lands are where my dead lie buried. That's what I'm making there." And when they tried to take a picture of him, he said, "What, would you imprison my shadow too? You've taken everything else."
I've asked some of the great poets, and the word crazy, the way the Indians used it, was like he was mad for the love of something, mad for the love of his people. And of course, the white man interpreted it as crazy. I mean, he was mad because he loved his people so much he didn't want things to change. Of course, the white man's aggressiveness and greed, even though the Treaty of 1868 meant an awful lot to the Indians, when they discovered gold 6 miles from here, that was broken. So he went out, I suppose you'd call it the warpath, to make the white man keep that treaty. And then from the time he was about 27 years of age, 26 years of age and 7, till the day he was murdered under a flag of truce down at Fort Robinson, he never let his people down. Never. He tried to uphold the dignity and the culture and the way of life of his people without looking for any aggrandizement for himself whatsoever.
Holding steadfast to his free enterprise philosophy, Korczak twice rejected $10 million in potential federal funding, including an offer from a U.S. Secretary of the Interior who visited Crazy Horse.
Well, he said, I'll tell you what you do. You come to Washington, we sit down, we'll draw up an ironclad contract. And between the government, yourself, and the Secretary of the Interior, and the Crazy Horse Commission. I said, an ironclad contract? I said, Mr. Secretary, tell me about those ironclad treaties you drew up with the Indians. Well, you know, he didn't get angry with me, thank heavens, because we are still good friends today.
Some skeptics and doubters continued to question Korczak.
One day, years and years ago, I went down to watch the blast down at the studio. This fellow said to me, Mister, how do you know that Crazy Horse is in that mountain? Well, I looked at him, I didn't quite believe him, but he was serious. And I said, well, I'll tell you what I do. Every morning up there, I drill about 8, 10, 16-foot holes. And then I fill them full of dynamite. And just as I pull up the plunger, I say, Crazy Horse, are you there? And I push the plunger down, and he says,
As the years passed, Korczak's great progress blocking out the rough form of Crazy Horse won him an army of grassroots supporters from across the nation.
Yes, it's quite surprising. There were a lot of Doubting Thomas years ago who have now become very great friends, who thought I was crazy. Of course, I guess you do have to be a little bit crazy, don't you, to do a thing like this? Especially when you tell the government that you can keep that $10 million twice. Huh?
If I hadn't worked on Mount Rushmore, and I'd been with Gutzon Borglum, who was a sculptor of Rushmore, even then I don't think I would have taken it, because I watched what he went through. They watched every penny he used. Do you realize that man carved that mountain for about $9,000 a year? And when he died, he didn't have a $10 bill, and he was abused. We want to stop that wild man from destroying our beautiful Black Hills. Didn't make any difference if it was George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, or Teddy Roosevelt. It didn't make a bit of difference. But Gutzon Borglum taught me a lot, to not take government money.
This is how Crazy Horse will look when it's completed. Korczak was convinced the government would neither finish the mountain carving, as it failed to finish Mount Rushmore, nor carry out the humanitarian goals, the whole purpose of the Crazy Horse dream.
It's a strange thing. A lot of people like the spectacular, the sensationalism of the size of the mountain. And I try to tell the people that I did not come out here because I'm an Indian lover. I'm not. I'm a storyteller. I'm a storyteller in stone. And when standing there asked me to tell the story of their great chief who was killed many years ago, I wanted to tell the story of the North American Indian. The blackest mark on the escutcheon of the American people is the story of the Indian. Now, my purpose of being out here is to, first, I must give them a little bit of pride. Well, I'm not Nelson Rockefeller. I'm not a millionaire. In fact, I started this project with $174. But if I can carve a mountain, that'll be one of the great things of the world. That'll tell the story of a race of people that once lived here, which are now practically extinct. I will give the few remaining Indians a little bit of pride to themselves. Secondly, I will try to right a little bit of the wrong that our white people, and I am one, but my father and mother were born in Poland. I was born in Boston. But I want to right a little of the wrong that they did to these people, because this is part of American history. You know, there's an old saying, and I've quoted it 2 or 3 times in my life, and it goes like this: when the legends die, the dreams end. And when the dreams end, there is no more greatness. I'd like to think our country is great. I'd like to think that we are capable of righting a wrong. This is my purpose. I don't want to just, I'm not interested in the tourist gimmick. I'm not interested in making money. I could stay in New York, I could stay in Boston, and I could have been very wealthy. But I chose to come out here, to live in a tent, to do it the hard way. I didn't realize that Indians were despised out here. But they want me to carve this mountain. Even the people who are against Indians want me to carve it. Of course, they are only interested in one side of it. I'm interested in the side to right the wrong, the little bit that I can, to let the world know that once upon a time a race of people lived here, because 100 years from now there will be none of them left. My whole dream and desire is to carry out the purpose of people like Phidias, people like Michelangelo, people like Leonardo, people like Rodin, people like Gutzon Borglum, to tell the story so that the world who runs may read. It's not a personal thing. You know, I'm building a tomb at the bottom of the mountain, about 2,000 feet this side of the mountain. And I've written my own epitaph. And it says, Korczak, storyteller in stone. May his remains be unknown. I am not interested in myself. I'm interested in my nation, my country, my people. I'm interested in those Indians who have many, many gifts to give. I believe we have seen these Indians. We have seen these people. We have other races in this country who are also great. But I was asked out here by an old chief and his fellow chiefs to tell the story of his people, that the white man will know that the red man had great heroes also. When I am gone, many people will come here. I would like to feel that the medical center, the museum, the university can be built for the North American Indian, not with the taxpayer's dollar, but with the people who come in here to see the mountain, the artifacts, and the history of these people that once lived here, which now are almost obliterated. Crazy Horses is not just a place. Crazy Horse is a living symbol. What do I say to those people? I say, why can't it be completed? It took Notre Dame in Paris 600 years to be built, and it isn't built yet. Took 300,000 slaves 20 years in order to build one pyramid, and you put 5 pyramids in this mountain. What you're going to have, I guess, a couple more dreamers like me that'll come along and say, well, why not finish it? In the olden days, you know, you take the statue of the Condottieri in St. Mark's Square. That was made by 3 sculptors, Lombardi, Verrocchio, and Ghirlandaio. It's not wrong for another sculptor to come along and finish a person's work, or a good engineer.
Maybe it'll take 100 years. What difference does it make? Isn't time relative? 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 year?
Korczak battled the mountain nearly 36 years until his death in October 1982 at the age of 74. He realized at the outset the project was much bigger than any one man's lifetime. So he and his wife Ruth prepared 3 books of detailed plans and measurements with which to complete the mountain carving. She and their large family are using those plans to continue Korczak's work. They and the non-profit Crazy Horse Memorial Foundation and many others are dedicated to the realization of the Crazy Horse dream. His family has the benefit of having been well trained by Korczak, who always was a teacher as well as a careful planner for the future, as Mrs. Ziolkowski explains.
And he left everything laid out. I don't think we'd have to have another thought for more years than I can imagine being around, and we'll be able to follow along with his plans. And I intend to be up on the mountain with the youngsters as much as I can be, and still keep an eye on what's going on down here, because Korczak loved it up on the mountain. And he always said when it came to this part down here, well, it was necessary because this is where the money's made, but he was happy up there. So this down here has to run, just as it always did. But we all have, nobody can take his place, nobody can do what he did. We can all just try to carry out his plans as he laid them out for the future for all of us. He made a lot of friends over the years, and he touched an awful lot of lives. He really did. And just the perseverance that he's had, I think, has proven to a lot of people, especially youngsters, that if you want to do it badly enough and you're willing to work hard enough and pay the price, you can do anything you want to do.
Korczak was a man for all seasons, and he was eulogized as a man of legends, dreams, visions, and greatness, who lived a love affair with his mountain and the story it tells. He lived it the hard way because he never was content just to talk about his dream. He made it happen because he believed passionately that work is one of life's greatest blessings.
I'll tell you something I very, very, very seldom ever utter. The world asks you one question, only one. The world asks you, did you do the job? And in my book, there's only one answer. Yes. You don't answer, I would have done the job if I'd had the money. I would have done the job if people had been sympathetic or understood what I was trying to do. I would have done the job if I hadn't gotten hurt or crippled. And God knows I've been crippled. You don't even say I would have done the job if I hadn't died. You don't buy it. I don't buy it. There's only one answer. Yes. My lands are where my dead lie buried. Oh, I love that phrase. It rolls beautifully. Where are your lands now, Tashunka Witko? My lands are where my dead lie buried. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful?